I still make lore content, I promise. I have a book full of ideas for topics I can make and work on. What I don't have is another place outside of here to voice my concerns and opinions on topics that I do care about. But that's also why this video is starting out different than the rest that I have made. I also think that if we had a few more of the things that I'll go over today, the last two videos that I've made may not have been necessary at all. At least I think so. You may not. That's okay. That's why this is my channel and why you guys can always tell me that I'm crazy, wrong, or just out of my gourd. I listen and will take your feedback. I hope that I can do the same with Bungie, or if anybody over there really cares what it is that I have to say at all. When I produced my Bright Dust video, or at least wrote it, I guess, I never intended to make a series like this, to voice out towards Bungie what it seems like they're missing, along with what it seems they're just whiffing. Swing and a miss, as the old saying goes. Basically, I'm gonna get it all out now so I can move on and get back to things that I know most of you are actually here for. This is just me trying to do some extra commentary and realistically just to clear it out of my head. This is me simply seeing where improvements can lie with games I've either played in the past and apply it back to Destiny, or games that deliver gaming outside of the same constant grind to get a weapon with a 0.2% chance to drop with the roll that I really want it to be. Let's not disillusion ourselves for what Destiny is, okay? Thanks for humoring me a bit here while I get through all of this. Really, I do appreciate it. But before I get too far, I do want to stress that I like the game. I know that Cosmo, Deej, Vanessa, and several others have also been very active over on Reddit to take in the feedback that many have given about the reveal of the final assault within the Black Garden, as well as Festival of the Lost and other stuff. I also am not always going to expect to want to play the game all the time, day in, day out. I think that's an objective no one should expect of Bungie or any other developer. If someone can nail it, then fine, by all means go for it. Overall, things haven't been terrible, but to say rushed and piled on is a bit of an understatement, but I'm ahead of myself. One saying that goes along with Bungie and Destiny as a whole is wasted potential. I feel that phrase sums up my thoughts pretty well with Season of the Undying, but not as much with Shadowkeep as a whole, I suppose. Though that's arguable in and of itself, I suppose, as well. Let's go over the season so far. Shadowkeep is largely separated from the Season of the Undying, but yet they are overall linked. They're also shared and sold under the same package, so there is that as well. The difference in how this content is received, however, is thanks to time. Whether this content will still be around for later is the question, and that's the thing that feels to be separated from season and campaign-related missions and content. To put it another way, anything Hive-related is thanks to Shadowkeep, while anything Vex-related is Season of the Undying. I think that's the easiest way to explain it, and I think to understand as well. Shadowkeep's content has been pretty alright. Mostly. I mean, let's be honest for a bit. As much as the moon is updated quite a bit in both traversal from area to area, along with the lost sectors being added and the overhaul to the area almost entirely, it is still the moon. And it is still the general place we're very familiar with from Destiny 1. But for those that never went to Luna before, never had a chance to play Destiny 1, well, you're the ones I'm really happy for, to see just how much Clovis Bray and the Golden Age were just horribly awful, along with the creepy factor Luna has always had, or at least in my opinion. That's genuinely cool. Speaking of, hints to the next video? Maybe? We'll see. I gotta figure the mood I'm in. But as far as the content drop of Shadowkeep, excluding Season of the Undying, even though I know again that it's included, it's been a lot of new grinding areas added on top of grinding areas. I know, how much can you really change Destiny overall? I get it, but that's just how I see it. We start off with the moon proper for a patrol area. We have a couple new strikes. We have the dungeon that was added in with Pit of Heresy over Festival of the Lost here, though that wasn't given on release. Not that that is an issue, just pointing it out. Altar of Sorrows, which feels like what Sorrow's Harbor should have been on day one. I mean, it seems like a fair majority of the mechanics were already there, so I don't know. And we have the lore books and other acquisition items that go along with it. Obviously, you have the story, you have the Eris content, the weapons and armor to grind for, and that's about it, yeah? We did get several new exotics with only one returning one, as far as I recall, and all of their uses paled in comparison to Recluse and One-Eyed Mask. Am I right? Bit of shade thrown there, but had to get that dig in there somewhere, even with the recent nerf. By the way, not covering the ideas of balance and so on for this season, because I can't keep up with that crap per this point, and in some ways it's way too much for me to even bother listening to anymore. If you want my blunt opinion, it's a lot of whining, with very few voices out there trying to get some, at least in my opinion, good opinions out there. You can do with that what you will, considering you're hearing my opinion of a good opinion, and my opinion isn't your opinion. Glad we got that opinion settled. Season of the Undying supplies us with the rather fun Vex Invasions on the Moon, and Vex Offensive. I'm sure there's something else that will be closed down with the inevitable, the event of this season is going to close, and so is the other stuff behind it when the season shifts. Still, worried about that, but I'll leave it go for now. We'll praise or criticize as needed once that road pops up. And that's how the season has been so far. It's been one event that's meant to build on the season as a whole, as the centerpiece of everything, and this is where the general philosophy of this evolving storyline behind the event just kind of turns into a flop, all in all. Let me explain. If the future of seasons is meant to build up on the moon or another area that we may already have, because I can already foresee us going back to Mercury or Mars real fast, while giving us a single event that is meant to last the season before it's taken away again with the season shift, then that might work out all right, so long as some other pieces are linked up here, but I'll get to that in a bit. It mostly has to do with this idea of evolving story, and I think largely that's where Bungie's really fallen down flat on this whole concept. If the seasons are going to be, here's the new event that you can play, and that's it, I think you can see the issue I'm having here. It's not very great longevity in the making. That's going to be very questionable at best. That's like Season of the Drifter levels of questionable. That's like making a season dedicated to Crucible competitive and seeing your player base fall over with heart attacks or something. Pretty well dropping like flies. Bad jokes aside, Vex Offensive was fun the first time, and then it didn't really vary itself at all. Not like the Menagerie, which I dissed early on and then started getting into it a bit more. Not that it also didn't get old with time, but it at least varied the gameplay and delivered something different to the team for at least I would say the first solid week or two at that point, to at least vary how that playstyle was. Again, I think it's arguable in terms of how any content is going to be received and how you're going to like it over time, but I hope you kind of get my point. Vex Offensive is the 3 waves of the exact same enemies and areas that we go through, and if we are, in fact, going through all of the possible timelines for these Vex and how we're knocking them out and have them be less of a threat to our system, the Vex work on altering their simulations and knowledge of timelines by altering things, like their attack patterns and such, which we are told about in the Vault of Glass. And the Infinite Forest caused that to become even more of a reality outside of just adding some extra portals into the Vault of Glass to access Praetor's super death of the Vex dimension with the Taken and everything. Yeah, I think I got my point across here. If I expect anyone to alter the combat patterns with information being passed back and forth in an instant, it's the Vex. And we didn't get that here at all. Now, the event itself could have been met with one of the worst pieces that development can face: time. Eventually, you've got to produce the content to the players that play your game. This should never be rush it out to the populace, let's get this done, however, which is a growing trend for games nowadays, it seems, and we don't really have to look far for that. But as even a low-end content creator, there is a point where I have to say, good enough, let's go. This could have been one of those cases, and oversaturating the game mode with a ton of loot to counteract that lack of actual gameplay seemed like an obvious move. Not that it's great, but it is a point of obvious fact that could have happened. Could. It also seems like a really obvious move to make to a character swap from a Vex major target that we've been fighting throughout all of Vex Offensive, going from a Minotaur to a Hydra being the Undying Mind. Again, because I haven't Imago looped farm enough in my life. Speaking of, no reports nor chance of seeing that beauty drop again, which does deal with a bit of my gripes with the slight season shift here. I expected that after Festival of the Lost was over, we would see the portal go live. I was right. And wrong. Most of you know what happened with the portal per this point, I think, and I made it abundantly clear on the old Twitter that even if this spawn-in sequence is kinda cool, compared to what's been set up in the lore per right now, it's a bit of a letdown. I mean, to be fair, Ikora doesn't seem like she has any power running into this portal inside of the tower, but I guess space magic can come along and turn it on whenever it wants to. Still gotta get my thoughts out on that moment if that moment ever happens, since if that moment doesn't happen, it's gonna cause all sorts of issues past what I'm even talking about here today, especially with the narrative direction of the season as well, between points written in the lore and the fact that the thing was made inside of the city of all places. These are just things that absolutely beg answers. But anyway, perhaps I should sum this up in a different way. Perhaps it'll make a little bit more sense if I compared it to something else that actually was on the lower scale of everything, like Season of the Drifter. That was a bad idea. I think most of us can agree with that. I find more reasons now to go back and perform the activities that Season of the Drifter gave us from the time period, but when it launched, it was a bad idea. It needed an extra buffer and something else to break from, including a break from Reckoning, instead of constantly focusing on Gambit or any events that were around Gambit. It was a bad pinwheel of a loot track. Meanwhile, I see the same thing happening with Vex Offensive, but it won't have the benefit of building on top of the events that we have available to us within the game already, since it's going away in Season of Dawn. But there were a few things that Season of the Drifter and Joker's Wild did mostly well, and as a proof of concept, I'm going to use it in order to outline my point. In fact, they did so well that it makes Season of the Undying's general predicament look a bit silly, and just kind of show that Bungie's not learning from what they're actually creating. I'm gonna sound like a broken record for some of this, but I do have a point. If you didn't read any of the lore books found in Joker's Wild, like Ecdysis for instance, then you could actually get away with it, especially if you performed the weekly invitations of the 9. By the way, can still get those from Xur every week on characters that haven't completed them, just like how that builds on old and new content, something that Bungie is getting away from for whatever reason. The invitations outline the general lore we started to receive, both about the Emissary, or Orin, Drifter, Shin Malfur, and several others. Well, maybe not so much Shin, but it still dealt with the fall of the Drifter and how he became who he was. In fact, the Allegiance quest is the perfect tie-in for almost all of this, and it did something generally similar by outlining why the Drifter does what he does, or at least why he started doing what he did, or how he acts, and bringing out Gambit and so on. If you didn't read A Man with No Name, the lore book, then you could still get away with the information passed to you by the Allegiance quest, and that was pretty alright. Now there's still some time to make all of this work for us here in Season of the Undying, and kind of make it all tie together. I'm just gonna say there's one aspect of Destiny's lore that would really bring the time together as we go through a lot of possibilities on who could walk through that portal And it's someone we've totally come in radio contact with before they were locked out of time. I swear if I have to make that theory any more obvious, I'm gonna punch a wall. I'm a Titan now. This is what I do, okay? But just to state it again, in my opinion, Joker's Wild did this portion of its storytelling better than what we've had so far in Season of the Undying, all because it wraps itself together, and it ties the lore and story in a better box with a bow on top. It's a messy bow, and the wrapping paper is probably not taped well or anything, but, gets the job done, right? It at least worked with lore and in-game storytelling better than most any other season has previously, quite bluntly. I think if it didn't overlap so much and kept hinting back to the events within the lore almost exactly and made the reading of them almost worthless, it would still have some of the mystery a bit more if they left some of that open, or still make reading the books worthwhile for those that could or wanted to do so. That was my major complaint with Joker's Wild. But it still manages to show a better side than Undying. I don't know how this happened. And that question mark at the end is pretty well my general sentiment for the rest of what we'll talk about today. Does Season of the Undying really get the job done? Is it keeping people interested? Is it scratching an itch that's allowing us to say, this is Destiny in the best form it has ever been in, from both veterans and new players alike? I'm going to argue that we had a better uptick in things from Forsaken more than we did from Shadowkeep and Shadowkeep's first season. But this is also where things are questionable and why I'm wondering, what happened? As a reminder, Forsaken dropped and we had tons to bowl through. We also had the Curse to investigate. Then we had Season of the Forge. But that wasn't given to us until December, with Forsaken launching in September. Here, Shadowkeep and Season of the Undying largely overlapped, minus about a week's difference, I believe. And that wasn't a ton of time. Heck, with the events planning for Luna, along with the Festival of the Lost, they almost could have put Season of the Undying back a month or so, started it now, and extended our general playtime into something else. That is if Shadowkeep, of course, had more to offer, I suppose. As far as the Battle Pass goes, they could have made a smaller one to ease players into the system or something. I don't know. It's not generally what I worry about. Regardless, it feels like a lot of overlapping content that doesn't really push all the buttons that it should be, and after Forsaken's launch and content, that's something we know Bungie can do. In a lot of ways, this is why it feels, for me, Season of the Undying is largely slapped on top of Shadowkeep, and is more meant to buffer what we can expect more than anything else. But that is what they said its general purpose is, which is to set up Season of the Dawn and usher it in with a bang or something. And then, I'm sure Season of the Dawn is going to be there to set up the next stepping stone, and so on and so on. The question is, where is there actually going to be some kind of payoff? Because right now, with the way that this season has been progressing, even though I know they have mentioned in their newest this week at Bungie that this is just the step to go forward, the lead up has been absolutely awful. This little trip down memory lane of the last month and a half is here to serve as a reminder of what we've seen so far, as well as to hold Bungie accountable for this live service game that they've given to us. I know I've definitely grinded a lot of content within Destiny lately, but to say I overall enjoy the content and direction that the story is going is just not happening per this point. And I should say, I don't like how this whole evolving story idea is forming, just to reiterate, because Ikora telling me how the progress of the gate is going every week, only to have it spawn on top of the gate I've been seeing inside of the event I've done far too often with zero variation minus the ending boss, is not a great cap or even start to the last push of the season itself. It feels very incomplete and very forced. That's not well-produced world building in the least. I would have hoped for some kind of darkening or powering of the garden as a whole, along with a variation in play with the Vex Offensive, especially with the constant focus on you had to be there to see it moments like laser tag and Season of the Lord of Wolves. In addition to this group of Vex that worship the darkness, and apparently the darkness starting to become more active again, why is it that there isn't extra focus on that? Why isn't that there is an extra push to try to make that more of a focal point? To me, that would be the way that you evolve everything, just like you did with the Curse week over week for that first 3-week period. That was a magical experience, I would almost say, and something that's sorely missed absolutely here when you've got to tie in directly with the darkness. Like, come on. But that's also where I want to throw the benefit of the doubt on Bungie here and say that there's several pieces behind the scenes that cause all of this to make sense. Bungie just got done a rather nasty and lengthy split with Activision. I think most of us know that. I think it's pretty obvious given the way the cash shop is handled at this point, along with expansions and season pass pieces. This is definitely not the same title, and sadly puts a lot of pressure on the fan base that has been around for quite some time. There is still a point, I've got to stress this, where I can absolutely operate on goodwill and give back to you, Bungie, but there is a point where I've got to say enough is enough, and you have to realize that I can't constantly give you money for that. But behind Bungie were two other studios when they were working over at Activision that helped them to produce content before with Destiny 2. High Moon Studios helped produce some of the content with Bungie, in particular Forsaken in some or whole degree, along with Vicarious Visions, which helped with Warmind and Black Armory at the least. We're unsure to what length this development team-up went, but to say that they had helped the Bungie team with creating content goes without saying. And I just wonder how much they may need that help again to consistently make content that's going to be big and to the levels that we expect to kind of receive from them at this point. Bungie, if the issue is manpower and the issue is creating content that's going to last for a while, then I really hope you've thought that through with Season of the Dawn. Because per the moment, your showings with Season of the Undying are going to see people in for the length of their Battle Pass grind and then just sort of fall off. And for some, they won't even feel the need to go that far, because the events that you have will feel very stale at that point. If all you do is add in one more activity on top of our current grind, while also taking one away. I understand that we as players are a very hard bunch to please. I'd say it's impossible to please us all. I'd say I understand better than some that at a point within creation, you just have to go, good enough, move on. But when I combine the last 3 videos I've produced, and I look over how they are extrapolating the game as a whole, it doesn't paint a great picture for the future of the game, especially with half-assed elements like the Leviathan's Breath bow quest, just to name another instance that doesn't line up well with this grander experience that you've propped up for us over time. There's not even a lore entry for frick's sake on the thing, Bungie. Come on. Again, my goodwill can only go so far. If Season of Dawn is going to be one more event that gets added on top of our basic grind because you're also taking away Vex Offensive, yes, I'm going to reiterate that plenty of times, and it takes place on, say, Mercury, that's not going to end very well. There's only so far that players can go for the basic grind of Gambit and Strikes and Crucible. Pinnacle weapons only go so far within a season, and the last couple have been fairly simple to actually get a hold of. The lack of rank-up grinds from vendors really detracts from my interest to play any of the game modes. My pull should not solely be to complete weeklies for Bright Dust from the 3 main vendors. That's just not going to cut it soon enough. And my interest in Eververse is going to go out the window when you don't produce content properly and doesn't interest me in the least. And on that note, the last thing I should bring up, tell me which looks cooler. The main Vex Offensive armor, or the one found in the Premium Battle Pass? Now, how about the detail and work done on the Empyrean armor set from Eververse? I don't have to go too much further than that. This season you gave us 3 new armor sets if I count the one from the raid, and 2 more sets that were locked behind Eververse or the Premium Battle Pass, with another 3 sets blocked behind silver again. Old ones, sure, but another several sets behind that system. I am glad you reworked old armor sets from planetary vendors to make them work with Armor 2.0, but their usefulness isn't always there. Also, what's the deal with Reckoning Armor not having the ornament slot? So weird. Just figured I'd get those last few points in my rant and move on here, so sorry about that. Anyway, I think that's where I'm going to leave things. Traveler knows I've rambled on enough as it is. If you enjoyed this look down memory lane at the last month and a half to see what we've actually gotten for our cash and time, most importantly our time, then I hope this has helped you to put things in perspective. I know there are plenty of elements that go into games and what we all prefer to play, but I do hope we see a bit more than just another event in Season of the Dawn. Otherwise, like the Warframe community is doing right now at D3 Publishing, I can see things devolving into a screaming match real fast. Not that Reddit isn't already just a screaming match, but I think we pretty well know that already. If there's anything I forgot to add in here, let me know in those comments below, and do me a favor with those like or dislike buttons, since YouTube really does track that stuff, and I'm seeing steady growth on the channel again, and I appreciate that from you guys very, very much. If you want to stick around, that's on you. Won't force it. If you have thoughts on where Bungie is going or what you envision right now, then let me know below as well. For me, personally, wherever I saw potential, I'm not quite as sure as I was. I'm starting to see a lot of clouds on the path ahead. In some ways that's exciting, but they're the wrong kind of clouds, especially in the ways of future and development and so on. I know the guys at Bungie are probably trying their darndest with the time that they have, but there's a point you have to admit where your weaknesses are. I'll see you next Space Time. Take care.